Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Deep in the Plus. I'm your host, Rob Whiteside. Thank you guys, as always, for being with us on your Wednesday night. We appreciate you. If you have not already, please subscribe to WDWNT TV during this show, and also give us a thumbs up as it helps people to find us. Normally on Deep in the Plus, our slogan is that we go deep into the Disney Plus catalog. So if you've never been with us, welcome. Normally we'll go from anything to going deep into a TV show or a movie. Sometimes we'll do something like Frozen that's a little more on the surface, but get a little bit more into it. But this time we've gone, I feel like this is a pretty deep into the plus here, and bringing with me for the first time, Kamila. How are you?
Hi, everyone. Hi, Rob. I'm so excited to be on Deep in the Plus, finally.
I know we've been begging and pleading at the end of every Park Center, because Kamila joins us on Park Center, and saying, please, Kamila, pick something, come on to Deep in the Plus. And the last time you and I talked, you were like, oh, I got something. And I'm like, what? And I was blown away because you picked something out of the pile that I had not heard of before, and it's Kizazi Moto Generation Fire. And it's a series of 10 shorts by different animators, and I was like, okay, yeah, let's do this. And I have a lot of things to say and a lot of questions, and I'm sure you do too. So my first question for you though is what drew you to watch this in the first place and then choose it?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things, and I will be the first person to say I have Disney Plus. I really have pretty much all the different streaming sites, but I don't even watch that much television, and I'm very behind on movies. But what was interesting about this particular series of shorts is they came out right around the time that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse came out. And I haven't seen Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, but the animation style of that, because I did see the trailer, really stood out to me. And so I think what stood out to me about these shorts is first of all, the animation style kind of reminded me of that. And when I first saw the trailer for these shorts, I was like, is this Disney? Like, it did feel like Disney animation to me. So that's probably
Yeah.
the first thing that stood out to me.
And they're all very different. It's very similar to, and I think you and I talked about this in pre-show, something called Star Wars Visions, where each individual episode they don't connect to each other. They're in different art styles. They have different storylines. They have different ways of telling the story. It's the same thing. And so originally I was thinking when I saw this laid out, I was imagining what if the Marvel series where each one is sort of its own thing and then they all come together. But these are literally 10 very different stories, and they're long shorts too. That was the other thing. You were like, shorts. I was like, sure, shorts are easy to watch. I'll watch those. They come in at 15 minutes. Now, after you cut out the credits and everything, it's about 12. But I was like, wow, that's like 2.5 hours of content. And I'm like, what did I sign up for? But but like I said, they went pretty fast. Some of these things I feel like, and I want to dive into each one. We won't get into the minutia of each one, but I want to kind of talk about each of these as we go through. But I feel like some of them could have been full-length movies.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what's kind of interesting because once I started to watch some of these shorts, then I became more interested to learn more about, how did this even get to Disney Plus? And the backstory is actually very interesting. So Peter Ramsey, who is an executive producer on Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, actually saw some of these animators in 2019 in a animation film festival in South Africa. And so he started talking to them, having conversations, and basically just was on a mission to get them to have some kind of partnership with Disney. And so it's interesting that from what I understand, this is kind of the beginning of what could be much more as Disney through Disney Plus looks to expand, their content, looks to reach different cultures, different continents. And so just there was a lot about the backstory of this animation and how these shorts got to be on Disney Plus that was really interesting to me. The other thing about this is if you watch these, I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are, but you can immediately see, I think, the Black Panther influence. Like there's so much African futurism infused into, I felt like each of these shorts, and they're very different. The animation styles are different. You can tell the cultural influences are different, but there's absolutely like I feel like every time I would read something about these shorts of like African futurism, and I feel like that is a constant in each of them.
You know what? There are a lot of constants that I was drawing when I went from one to the next, but I definitely on that very first episode, which is called Herder Boy, and I don't think I can really pull up much other than I'll show the thumbnail here because I think if I hit play, it just plays it. But Herder Boy is the first one. And as you can see, the ships in the background and this visor and everything, I got that same vibe absolutely from Wakanda
Yeah.
Forever or from Wakanda in general.
Hmm.
And I was looking at it going, am I just trying to see that? Like, am I trying to see that? Because, like it's again, they've got some sort of crystal or some power, and I feel like it's unclear what that
Hmm.
is. Even one of the actresses from Wakanda Forever is one of the main voices in this. And I thought when I saw her, she would be like a common thread through all these, and she's not. Again, there are some people that do voices in all of them, but they're all listed as additional voices, so there's not really a star other than her in this one. She plays Ao in the movie. uh, she's part of the Dora Milaje, and she is kind of that same character. She's got she's a warrior. She has the spear. She's very like confident and strong, and and so I was seeing that exactly, like the ships glow blue, sort of like if they have
Yep.
vibranium. So this seems like a culture in the first one, the Herder Boy episode, where they have found vibranium or something along the lines that has powered their culture, and so they're herding something that looks like cattle, but maybe it's a
Hmm.
robot. I don't like. It's very weird. But this one to me was out of all of them was one of the more traditional stories, as well as far as structure, animation, things like that. And it's beautifully done. It looks like it came out of Pixar or Disney. It's so crisp, and it's that 3D modeling that we're used to seeing now with anything. But yeah, the first one exactly. I was
Yeah.
feeling Wakanda. But you were talking about futurism. I want to talk about that for a second because what I picture in that is something. There was an animation studio called Kugali who was mentioned at D23, and they're making a movie called Iwaju. And so that was something that when you first mentioned this, I was like, is that already this? Is this the Kugali animation company? And maybe they're doing that kind of thing. But theirs is sort of it's Africa set in the future in a
Hmm.
way that's sort of like Wakanda. And so I'm thinking everything's going to be gadgets and gizmos aplenty and who's it's and what's it's galore. And I'm watching this, and I feel like, and you tell me if I'm wrong, I feel like the common thread in this is less technology and
Hmm.
more mystic, magic,
Yeah.
like strange things. Like, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's interesting too because I do think this first short, one of the first things I thought of, because like when you first kind of um enter the scene or you enter the short, you're right, like in the middle of what feels like a herding, right? It feels like you're in the savannah somewhere, or it feels like you're seeing something that you would expect to see, maybe in Tanzania or Kenya or something somewhere like that. And then all of a sudden, those, I'm going to call them spaceships because, I don't know what else to call them. But, then those like futuristic looking cars, driving devices, I don't know,
Cars.
they kind of pop up and, and it feels so unexpected. But one of the first thoughts I had that I also feel like is kind of a theme that you see through these is that connection, like despite some of the futurism and some of the gadgets and technology that you see, that also like that connection to maybe like the land, to the animals, and just the fact that they're still there caring for them, despite kind of this
Yeah.
theme of futurism. That was really interesting.
I definitely think that there's like some subplot or hidden symbolism all the way through these, and I'm sure there was like half that went over my head.
Yeah,
I'm
I mean,
completely
honestly, me
convinced.
too.
Yeah, I'm completely convinced that half of the symbolism that was happening in here was going over my head. But that said, here's another theme that I saw a lot was the kid that goes rogue because life or the adults are unfair to them. It's all over
Yeah.
the place. And there was a TV
Yeah.
show called 24, I don't know if you remember it or not. Kiefer Sutherland.
Hmm.
It was on Fox. It was a 24 episode season, and each season was a real time hour, or each episode was a real time hour. And the problem was Jack Bauer was a great agent, but his daughter Kim kept dragging him into problems because she's like, I'm going to be fine on my own. Problem. Now he's got this huge problem. That's what so many of these are. Like in the first episode,
Hmm.
the herder boy, when he goes into the cave, he's doing exactly what she told him not to do because I know, and he's like, I know better than you. I'm just going to ignore you. And now he's created a new problem. Now, luckily, he solves that problem, but I mean,
Right.
that's again kind of a common theme all the way
Yeah.
through episode 10. And I'm just like, and not all of them, but a lot of them feel that way. So, Herder Boy, it feels like a Wakanda Forever short.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, and I will say I absolutely agree that there's definitely this element of almost like growing up that is like a theme that I feel like we saw in each of them in different ways. But you always have these adults, and you have, and the protagonist is always a kid, and they're trying to show that maybe they're more grown than you think they are, or they can take on certain challenges that maybe the adults don't think that they're ready for.
Yeah. No, that again, yeah, you're right. But that's it. It's a common theme, and maybe that's what this is supposed to be doing. Is it's supposed to speak to the next generation. That's where the
Mhm.
futurism comes in, etc. But definitely, it gave me those Kim from 24 vibes when he ran into the cave. I was
Mhm.
like, come on, man. She just told you. Did you not hear her? She just told you. Yeah. So the first one, though, again, I feel like it could have been a Wakanda spin-off sort of a thing because
Mhm.
of it's they're in their own culture, but they have these future like technology things, but it's unclear to me what's organic and what's machine, because even like
Mhm.
as they are themselves, she has like a glowing eye.
Yeah.
Her, her guy that helps her out has metal legs. Like, they've got a robot with them. So there's a lot of it that feels like it's really technology, but there's a mystical sort of a connection with the beast that makes me like go take it out of the, and a lot of these things, they're the way they work, it seems again very mystical. So that's what I took
Yeah.
away from that one. The second one, the Mukazi and the Spirit Racer, reminded me of so many things. The animation on that one was very different from the first one. It's
Mhm.
sort of more hand drawn. It kind of reminded me of, I don't know if you've watched Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur,
Mm.
but it reminds me of that kind of an animation. But it is really more anime, this episode is, than any of the
Yeah.
rest of them are. And it's very disjointed, like we've taken a story and redubbed it in English almost. And I don't know that that was done here, but it's so disjointed that I'm like, it's hard for me to keep up on what's going on. There's this big wig guy. There's this like mythical racer, and there's this big wig guy who comes in, and he wants to buy the city unless the mythical racer races him. And then there's a switcheroo. But again, the boy who starts in it is not supposed to be out speeding around the city, and that's another one of
Hmm.
those like, I'm not going to care what my parents do or anything like that. But um,
And
it's yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and with that one too, it was like, I think it was like his mother was a famous racer and he wanted to be like her. And, she was like, don't take, on this person, but he wanted to save his village. And I feel like that's another theme that is that kind of runs through a lot of these is wanting to save, whether it's your family, your community. And I definitely felt like that had a larger message that was attached to it as well. And just, here's this guy who's an outsider, really just this villain thug like character. And he, comes up and, if you lose this race, I take over everything. And so it just felt very like trying to find a way to kind of have a very serious conversation but like do it in a way that kids could relate to maybe.
Yeah. Um, so this one was again a very mystical thing because they take, not to again make another parallel to Black Panther, try not to, but when they go back in and like there's like kind of an ancestral plane, which
Mm.
I mean, that seems like it's right out of the page right out of the Black Panther book. So,
Yeah.
so with that one, Again, it's very mystical in the way it's put together, but it felt like you don't remember this. There was an episode or a TV show called Speed Racer. That was something that they made a movie of later on, but Speed Racer, the anime, was very much like this. Um, the other thing is that I put down was I got Star Wars podcast racer vibes from the race itself,
Mm.
right?
Hmm.
Like it's the big race, everybody's into it, and everybody in the town's watching, and et cetera, et cetera. Although the racetrack itself looked like Mario's Rainbow Road, so it's somewhere in there. One of the plot devices, not plot devices, but one of the things that happen in a bunch of these, and I don't know if you noticed this either, is that when they get to the end of a scene that is very climactic, and I'm not talking about the entire episode, but a scene, it'll go black, and you're like,
Mm.
what happened? And then it opens up again and you see what happened. But that is in a lot of these. And I was thinking that too. It's like the motorcycle crashes and then it's just black and then it kind of raises up again and he's okay. Like, it's that kind of stuff. And the same thing with when the cave crashes in the first one, same thing. Like it goes to black.
Hmm.
Um, I just found myself seeing that as a common thing, even in like we were talking about episode 8 Stardust. The same thing happens there. Where like now it's almost like a character like gets knocked out and wakes up, I guess, but that's not really what happened.
Yeah. It's interesting because I don't know if I did notice that, but for sure, I found myself with each of these having to pay very close attention. And literally, like, I would sit and watch each of these with like a pen and some paper and try to figure out, like, okay, what is this one about? And I think part of it, and there's one that we'll get to later where it's like, the girl is trying to earn her digital totem, and I felt like you had to know something about what a totem is and the significance. And so, it's interesting because for us, obviously, well, at least for me, in the West, watching this, maybe I kind of wondered, like, were there some cultural things that I was missing? But I was really trying to get like the big themes, but it was hard sometimes to figure out what is the story. Like, it definitely wasn't
Right.
it wasn't light casual viewing.
But again, they're long. They're like 12
Hmm.
minutes of content. I mean, if you take out
Hmm.
the intro, which I never wanted to skip the intro because I kind of dug the intro music with the logo changes. It's the same logo for everyone and the same music for everyone, and it was short. But at
Yeah.
the end, I would, when it would offer me the opportunity to get out of the next 3 minutes of credits and go into the next one, of course, I went into the next one instead.
Right.
Um, but when you think that these are like 12 minutes long, there should be enough time to convey something. I think in a Pixar short and a
Yeah.
Disney short, especially modern ones, they don't do a lot of dialogue. You
Yeah.
just, it's kind of like if you do, what was it, Feast, the one with the dog.
Hmm.
Like there's no talking in it really. It's just they're using music and the characters to emote what's happening. This one, it just like they had time and they had dialogue, and sometimes it does feel disjointed. The second one, I'm gonna say, might have been my least favorite. The
Hmm.
one with like
I
the
could see
with the
that.
racing, because again, it's very disjointed. The names are flying by you. Sometimes they're speaking in another language. I
Hmm.
used I used closed captions when I was watching this, and one of
That was a good
the
idea.
well, and there was a lot that said it would say what they were saying, and it would say in parentheses like in Zulu. So there was some that were in
Hmm.
Swahili. Most of them were, especially the early ones, were listed as Zulu as the language, which is great. Like I'm a
Oh,
fan of using the actual language in whatever we're talking about, whatever culture it is. So even Navi if it has to be.
yeah.
But when we're watching it and like without the captions, I wouldn't have known that that's what that was. So it
Yeah.
was cool that they did that. And I'm not good with the names because the names are all over the place. And even when you watch it with captions, the name as they have it pronounced, like that. This one for this episode was called Makuzi the Spirit Racer. Makuzi MK MKUZI. So I'm like, is that what it is? And then you hear it and you
Yeah.
know it, but when you see some of these names, you don't know it, and that's part of the problem I have when I read is like I want to build the entire world because I love movies.
Hmm.
I want to build that movie in my head, and it's like, how do I pronounce this name? And I go to my wife. She's like, you pronounce it any way you want. That's what you do. It's a proper noun. You pronounce it any way you want. I'm like, but when they make the movie, how are they going to say it? Like that kind of a thing.
Hmm.
Slytherin. Like, how is that going to be? What's that going to sound like when they make it a movie? So anyway, let's move on to the third episode. And again, I'm probably going to butcher this, but it's like Moremi. This animation kind of freaked me out a little bit. This is the
Same.
one. It's like,
Same.
okay,
I
yeah, it's like,
I was scared of it, and I
yeah,
think there's a couple of them, honestly, where I was like, "This is dark," like and we'll talk. I guess we probably can talk about this at the end, but there definitely was a part of me that was like, "Is this appropriate for kids?" I mean, I think technically it was PG, but some of these themes felt a little mature, and I think this was one of them. This one, I was thinking that the little boy is sick because he kind of like he starts out gray and it seems like almost like he's enslaved or he's trapped and then someone has come to save him. But then towards the end, you kind of see where there's like a couple of times where he makes a transition and it seems like there's a mother that's caring for him and she's got him in a pod or something. So like this was one where in the beginning it felt dark and I was a little bit scared. And then I was like, oh, is he sick? That's kind of maybe what I was thinking. That and because like there's a monster that's after him, and I was thinking the monster was representative of a sickness.
yeah. I'm trying to pull this up for a second just so that we can get a view of what he looks like because yeah, I agree with you. I
Yeah,
mean, it's like the backgrounds kind of remind me, as you were talking about Into the Spider-Verse, that kind of animation. But the foreground definitely feels like some sort of a computer generated situation. And yeah, he looks sick, and he's got some kind of device on him, and he has to go recharge the device, and we don't really know what's happened. This particular episode had quite the Sixth Sense like twist to it that I wasn't
yeah,
expecting. And so I don't really want to go too much into that, except for the fact that this one's dark.
yeah.
Like what she had to do and what ends up happening in the end. I mean, I just felt a little bit dark to me, and the animation was a little creepy. It was on this
I
one, I
completely
think,
agree.
but it was on this one, I think, that my mind started going to video game. Do you play video games at all?
A little bit. I watch them more, but yes,
Okay. Video game cutscenes. This has started reminding me of video
yeah.
game cutscenes, this animation. And there were a couple of them that I said that about. And as I'm sitting down watching one of these with my daughter, she's like, oh, this reminds me of a video game cutscene. I'm like, right, exactly.
Hmm.
And there were a couple, and this was one of them that looked like something that I've seen before in a video
Yeah,
game like animation. And, but yeah, like, I don't know how this gets into your head. And then you go, this is what I want to make, and it's like the
yeah,
kid looks like this in my head. Like, really?
yeah.
Okay. Like with the square, like digital eyes and the jughead hat and um, I mean, and then the almost like a pacemaker sort of thing that is his recharge. So I don't know. I don't know if you want to say anything else about this one, but it freaked me out.
Yeah. No, I agree. Like this one, especially the beginning, and all I can say is like if nothing else, watch the first few minutes of this one because I completely agree. It felt dark, it was scary. I didn't really know what was happening. And it really wasn't until I feel like close to the end that I started to be like, oh, that's what's happening. And, for some of these shorts, I feel like you almost have to also think about I do feel like they're making commentary on civilization, on culture, on what may be
Right.
happening in some of the countries where they're from. And, you think about some of the diseases that maybe, we've eradicated here in the US that they are still dealing with in countries in Africa. And so, you know, what I was thinking is that he was sick, and the monster that's in this short was representative of that sickness. Um, and but yeah, I mean, this was a perfect example of like one where it's not light casual viewing, and it just
Right.
genuinely makes me wonder, like, would a 12-year-old understand? I don't know.
But it's one of those things where they're saying that we need to make a sacrifice, and there are a couple of this in that's at the last episode has that too. Like we
Yes,
have to make a sacrifice
yes.
for Mother Earth. Is the undertone that I saw from this one, and it's like some of it's very heavy handed in your face. with the
Hmm.
overtone of, or the kind of like, the message that they're trying to do. And some of
Yeah.
it's, I don't know exactly what the message is. The next one that like the episode 4 was called Surf Sangoma. And again, the animation in this one felt like a cutscene. It felt like, actually, maybe it felt more like Polar Express. Maybe that's, there's
I could see that.
like, but
Expressive faces.
yeah, the expressive faces and like the teeth felt weird at some points. But the basic gist of this one is that there's this kid, and I think it's he, is
Hmm.
a legacy surfer, but it's in a world that's very much like Ready Player One, where the real world is horrible, and
Yes.
he's in this like bubble of wavy world where he's
Yes.
not a real surfer, but he's the grandson of a surfer, and so
Hmm.
therefore he's renowned. But these others see him as a poser, and they want him to go do the real surfing, and the real surfing happens on the edge of the town, which looks like
Hmm.
a town that's been buried. So again, like, buried in water.
Hmm.
And to and then to do the surfing, they have to put this like squid on their face, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
what's happening? Because again, you're telling this story in
Yeah.
11 and a half minutes. That's a lot of content to take in, I think. I don't know what you felt about
Yes.
this one.
This one, I feel like this is a one where I'm like, I need to watch this a few more times. But one of the first things that struck me is you start out the short in like, it just feels very bright and happy, right? Like it almost felt like you were in this water park. And, there's blue skies and palm trees. And one of the things that I wrote down and I noticed, like, there were literally sharks in the sky. I don't know if you caught that or remember that, but like when he's in this first little scene, like it was like you were at a nice little water park. And then all of a sudden, to exactly what you're saying, they kind of go almost like inside, and that's a common theme also, where outside there's this world that feels more familiar, and then part of the futurism is like, then they go inside and suddenly it's dark but it feels futuristic. um
Yeah.
and yeah, and like what's interesting too is like they went inside, and then there was like the surf there, and the theme for me about this one was like peer pressure, because his friend goes off with
Hmm.
these other surfers that seem bad. And he feels, pressure to either do that or go save his friend, and so there was that. And then also riding the wave, like it was so interesting to me that surfing is what they're doing. Like, what's the symbolism of that for this one? Because I don't know, like, is surfing something that is common there? Like, it just was a really interesting activity to include. Um,
Uh, uh, Fire Chief 66 said, I'll have to watch this tomorrow. It seems like an out of the mold series. I would say, yeah, absolutely. It is. Each one. Here's the thing though. Normally I would save this for the end, but I would like to say that, and I don't know if you would agree with this. I sat down and watched all 10 of these back to back. I think that was a mistake. Honestly, I
I
feel
could
like
see
each
that.
one should have probably been consumed on its own.
You needed
Like watch
time. I
one,
agree.
watch one, and then watch an episode of, I don't know, Modern Family, and then watch one, and then maybe pop in Cinderella or something like that. I don't know. It's just like you needed some mental floss, I think, in
It was
between all of
heavy.
these.
Yes.
Yeah, because it was heavy, and again, I feel like a better person having watched them, because I feel like I've learned things and I've seen other pieces of culture and all of that. But at
Yeah.
the same time, I'm just like, it was a lot to take in. Like I
Yes.
said, 2.5 hours of content to take in, and you and I are watching on a different level because we're watching it to then talk about it,
Hmm.
to kind of give thoughts and feelings and all that kind of stuff. So I would recommend, if you guys are going to watch this, that you watch them, if you haven't already, you watch them one at a time. The
Yes.
fifth episode is the one you kind of talked about earlier today, earlier in the show. It's called First Totem Problems, which I think is a completely different vibe. Um, it
Yes.
it kind of feels like it was written in the tone or the voice of a teenage girl who is,
Yes.
again, the same thing though. It's the parents are keeping her down, and there's some weird thing about you can't get on the train unless you have an adult. Which I saw this
Right.
at Publix this weekend. some 14-year-old kids were trying to buy something from the bakery, and the bakery person told them they needed to have an adult present to take something from the bakery case, or pull something out of the bakery case. Same thing. No, it's not the same
Yeah,
thing. It's the same kind of thing that says like,
it
hey, you're
is
too
though.
young to have this responsibility to get on a train or do whatever. And so there's this
Right.
force field that hits if you don't have your totem and you haven't become an adult. The totem thing reminds me, though, of Brother Bear. Because in Brother Bear, Kenai wanted his totem. There was the big day. He gets the totem. I don't like this one. And then, he's cursed and things happen. And watch our review of Brother Bear. But I like totem. My mind immediately goes to Brother Bear. Maybe it's just because I've seen that movie a lot. But the animation is in this is brighter. I couldn't put my finger on
Yeah.
where. Like I couldn't figure out like was it Proud Family I was looking at like some of the
Mhm.
animation, but then the animate like it's a little more bubbly than Proud Family. Like the girl's face is a little bit more rounded. And I'm just like I don't really know what I'm looking at here, but
Yeah.
it was pretty funny. And I think this one was actually had a sense of humor to it, but I
Yes.
think again there was a message, and whether the message was heavy-handed or not, the message was about family and remembering
Yeah.
where you came from and your history and not losing like sight of that. And a lot of kids, I think the thought process is do they're like I just need to be an adult. I don't really need to care where I came from. And then it becomes this thing. And because of that, here's my biggest comparison. And you tell me if you felt these vibes or not. Coco,
Oh yeah. Yeah, because you're like going to the
another
underworld.
realm. Right.
Yes, and the ancestors are supposed to help you get
Yep.
back. Yeah, and you know what's interesting? I literally had to kind of do some googling about like what is the significance of a totem because I just culturally I wasn't aware of that, and I did read where like a totem pole is supposed to give a family or a clan its name, its ancestry, and in this particular short, that's kind of what she's doing. She's crossing through. It's like a waterfall to go to the underworld quite literally and she kind of is like am I dead, what's happening, but her ancestors and her family are there and she's trying to get her totem, her digital totem, and she talks about like what's interesting is like how that almost becomes like a coming of age story, a rite of passage. And I saw the train as like a freedom symbolism because now she can go places. And because if you remember, like in the beginning of the short, she gets locked out and her mom forgets about her because on her own she can't just get on the train and go anywhere she wants. But once she has her totem, now she's an adult, and now she can go places. And so with this one, especially after the previous episode, I was like, okay, this one I could actually kind of understand, and it felt lighter for sure.
I'm going to say something very, very controversial. The master of ceremonies for the totems thing reminded me of a cross between the grandmother from the Proud Family and Medea.
I could see that. Yeah,
Crazy, right?
absolutely.
Because it was like, but there were weird characters all the way through this, and every now and
There
then,
were.
did you ever see a movie? And I'm pretty sure you didn't. I think I'm the only one that saw this. It was called The Fifth Element.
No.
Chris Tucker, you're familiar with Chris Tucker?
Hmm.
Chris Tucker played this weird person like from another planet, like who would always say the word like green, and he was like a trendsetter. It was almost like a RuPaul, like over the top sort of a situation. And that character seemed to pop up all through here. Like
Mm,
in the race episode, it was the announcer person that came before the big guy showed up. In the
yeah.
episode later on where we talk about social media, it was the like the stage, like
I know who you're
the MC
talking
on the
about.
stage.
Yes.
So
Yep.
it was like that kind of thing, is that wild outlandish character, and there were a lot of them
Yeah,
that were that. Now there were some
that's
that didn't
true.
have that. I don't think that the last couple had it, but like I was just like that was again another little common
Yeah.
theme that I started seeing through there. There was something called the soul suction room. This episode, again, we're talking about episode 5, first totem problems, had a lot of things in it that I think if I was paying more attention to this one episode, there are probably a lot of Easter eggs in here that I don't understand. like quick references and things, and when she's on the
Yeah.
conveyor belt and things that are on there, and like everything that's going on in the underworld or the on people on the
Yeah.
train. There's just so much happening in this one that and I think that it's pretty basic in general, but
Yeah.
it was uplifting after basically getting beaten over the head for the past four.
Yes,
So
no, I agree. And I think you're right. Like I feel like from a short perspective where you only have so much time to make your point and to tell your story, this one felt like it was able to do that in a way that was much more easily digestible compared to some of the others. But I think you're right. Like there was a lot there that probably, I maybe didn't catch, or if I watched it again, I'd be like, oh, okay. Um, and taking it in a different way. It also, one more thing that was interesting about this one,
okay.
why when she got to the other, like to the underworld, was there a help desk? Like that's one of the things I wrote down. I
Okay,
was like,
it wasn't just the help desk. It was the receptionist at the help
the
desk that was like,
reception.
what was that accent? It was like Babsa, Babsa, like when she was saying babes, like Babsa. I don't. I'm not doing it justice, but there was some weird, like I don't know what it was, but it was very
Yeah,
bizarre. And yeah, there was a help desk, and I feel like that. I don't know. Has that not been a common theme in some of the things in the underworld? Is that there's some kind of
I
they have that in
guess.
Coco when they get to the other side
Yeah.
of the bridge. There's like there's like a paper pusher's office over there that is very similar to that, where they have the great grandmother, and she's upset that she hasn't been able to cross over. So I do think that that happens often, but I don't know what that accent was she was doing. It was amazing, absolutely amazing. Um, like I said, this one seemed more funny than any of the others I think did. So that was kind of cool.
I
Um,
could see that,
this
yeah.
the next one that was it was so it's called I don't think I'm gonna be able to pronounce it correctly, but it's it's episode six. We'll just call it episode six. Um,
Makudzi,
yeah,
maybe?
exactly. Sure. Um, and so the animation style again is it's a computer animation type thing, and it feels also very familiar. And I don't know if it's because there's a
Yes.
multiverse situation happening, and they literally in the credits, I mean, the captions say something about a multiverse. But it's this kid, and it opens up, and it's very like TV or like old people's version of what social media is. So it's like all these captions and things are happening, and the guy's like doing
Yeah.
selfies, and he's like tagging a building but swinging from it too, and it's like in the ruins, and I'm like, what are you doing? And he sees this woman, and she's praying, and then he finds
Hmm.
himself in another universe,
Yeah.
um, and again, that universe feels very Wakanda-ish,
Yeah.
but very futurist, and that's again what we're talking about is like very futurist, but it's still mystical because like how did he get there,
Right. Right.
and what's going on, and this girl's there, and I don't know. This one again seemed like one that I thought you could have made a movie out of this one.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, and this one I felt like it felt kind of so immediately relatable because of the social media aspect. He's doing these outlandish things. And I think in this one I caught that he said he's supposed to be in Zimbabwe, but he's doing these outlandish things and he's live on social media and he's seeing all the notifications come through. And then he kind of gets himself in some trouble while trying to do these outlandish things. And one thing that's so interesting to me is this short is a perfect example of it starts out in a place where you think you might go if you're in Zimbabwe. And then the multiverse and this other kind of world he transports into after he gets himself into some trouble, that kind of becomes the futurism piece of it. And so there's a part of me that's wondering what is the connection between, the kind of the natural earth or the natural land that you might find in Zimbabwe, and then this futurism piece that they seem to go to as they're figuring things out. But I will say this one I thought was really heartwarming. This one and probably the last one were some of my favorites, and like I just almost made me cry.
Well, I mean, one of the things that he says in there is like, or that she says to him is, if Zimbabwe hadn't been colonized, this is what life would be. And I thought that
Yes.
was a very interesting to like go into that Marvel what if. Like, what if we weren't horrible as human beings? What if?
Yeah.
Like, what if
Yeah.
things
I wrote that
happened?
down too.
Yeah, so I mean, there is a lot of what if when it goes to this, but I also think that there's a lot of like, you were talking about Earth and environmental, and there's some of that
Hmm.
stuff too, which I think that leads into, to me, the episode 7, the Hatima, because Hatima
Mm.
blew my mind.
Yeah.
I was not prepared for where Hatima took us,
Yeah.
because and it reminds me again, there was some other movie, and I can't place it right now, that took us down this same road where it was like you're seeing these two different stories, and then again, not to spoil anything because we're not doing that tonight, but it took me to a place where I was like, it literally blew my mind, and I went, is this one my favorite? Because it made me, it took me by surprise.
Yeah. And I will say, I won't give away what happened, but I'm still wondering what happened. I mean, obviously I understand, but um, this one I also thought was really beautiful, but I was trying to understand how one of the characters got to the other world and what the significance of that was. But yeah, I mean, it was digestible, um, really well done, but just trying to understand, like, wait, so what does that mean? And I could never figure out like what was the significance exactly of the Hatima. And I just still I'm wondering, what exactly is that? But I have some ideas based on the short.
Well, and the animation again was, it looked more 2D, like hand drawn, than a lot of them did. It also reminded me, it gave me, because they're an underwater people, gave me Luca vibes,
Yeah.
which felt very similar in their relationship or fear to the surface dwellers. And
Yes.
then on top of that, I got a very um, I don't want to go back to Wakanda Forever again, but Namor and his storyline
Yeah.
from Wakanda Forever, that one, it kind of, I was like, okay, this feels a little similar when they tell us the history and what happened. So,
Hmm.
I thought it was well done though. I mean, and
I did
it's
too.
really, again, it's a very heavy-handed. The lesson is we're all the same.
Hmm.
Like, I mean, honestly, it really is, because it's the surface dwellers versus the people under the sea,
Hmm.
and you're like, oh wow, okay. I also and this is a really weird reference, but I always think of the Sneetches from Dr. Seuss. I don't know if you remember that, where it's like these two different factions, and one of them has stars on theirs. They have stars on, and
Yeah.
somebody comes in and sells them the opportunity to get stars, and then the people with stars are like, we don't want ours anymore. We want to be different from those folks,
Yeah.
and so at the very end, they all get mixed up, and they're like, oh, we're all the same.
Yeah.
But this was very heavy-handed in doing that.
Mhm.
But I think that's what it set out to do. So I don't know. It was pretty neat to see that one play out, I think. Um, Number 8 was Stardust.
Yes.
Is Stardust my favorite? I mean, again,
If you're a Star
Hatima,
Wars fan, I could see that.
right. Hatima was one of those, like I said, it very much challenged me, and I started going, okay, I didn't see that coming. Congratulations, M. Night Shyamalan, you did it to me again. Um, So, but then, when I'm watching Stardust, I'm like, okay, it starts off and it feels sort of Aladdin-ish with the little girl, and
Hmm.
then
Does.
and then as it moves on, the animation, like you said, I think you and I both draw this parallel, that it felt like a Star Wars animation, Clone Wars, Rebels,
Yeah.
or even the new Tales of the Jedi.
Yes. And because even one of the tools that she uses or wants, and I don't think this is really a spoiler, and I won't describe it in a way that it would be, but one of the tools that she receives literally looks like a lightsaber to me. It just doesn't have the blade. Did you get that or think that?
Sorry, I was looking around for something. Hold on a second. Talk a little bit more about
No
that.
worries. Yeah, no, I mean, what's interesting about this one too is the other shorts all feel like you're somewhere maybe in sub-Saharan Africa. This one feels much more like you're in the Middle East. And that's one of the things that I think is really fun about all of the shorts is the animation styles really are so different. Culturally, they each feel unique and different. But this one, to me, it felt like you were in the Middle East. The main protagonist or character in this short is a girl. In my mind, I was like, oh, that's Rey. To me, it was giving me like the Last Jedi vibes. And it even had what felt like was their version of a droid.
No, yeah, I would agree to that. And honestly, the creature just very
Yeah.
much feels like a Star Wars creature when they did it. And again, I don't want to give away too much this one, but I do think that you were right. It kind of takes you to this is a little bit of a different place. It's a little bit of a different time. It feels more like I said, sort of like it's set in sort of like an Arab country rather than being set in Africa where most of them feel like they are. So it's very unique. And again, I loved this one. It was like an action adventure movie. And that's the thing
Yeah.
too. We were talking about like, the totem one feels like a comedy. And this one feels
Hmm.
like an action adventure. And then the switcheroo and the Hatima. So there's a little bit of everything in all these. But yeah, I definitely felt like Star Wars animation vibes. Episode 9, Give Me Your Heart. Tell me
Yeah.
that's not giving Wreck-It Ralph, Ralph Breaks the Internet.
Yeah, I mean, it felt just instantly relatable, especially in the because it has to do with social media, which I don't feel like is really giving too much away about it. But it was interesting because it's all of the things that we do to try to get, love and recognition from people we don't even know on the internet. And we're trying to get followers and we're trying to get likes and, doing all of these outlandish things to get them and just some of the damage that you can do to real relationships and people. And so I thought this one felt very relatable. And the other thing that stood out to me about this one was just like the larger than life personalities. And I feel like I won't give away what happened, but
Yeah.
there's that moment at the end where I'm like, oh, I like how they did that.
Yeah, and it was also this whole thing where he all he wants is to be, one of the influencers. But they're comparing influencers to gods. At least the
Hmm.
influencers think they are gods, and then I start thinking, do they think they're gods? Maybe, I don't know.
I think
Um,
so.
but it's like, you're not going to be on our level until you get, a million followers. And so then,
Yeah.
they have these little trackers. And it reminded me, and again, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but there was an episode of a TV show called Community where they came in and introduced a new social media system. And the social media system, you collected meow meow beans. And then
Mm,
if you got the meow meow beans, you would get stars, and you would you have 3 beans, 4 beans, or 5 beans. And so if you were like the 5 stars, then you were gods. And that's
mm,
kind of how this works out. And then the bigger they are, the harder they fall, right? Like that's one of those
mhm.
things too. And then they want to break the system from the inside. Um, it made me want to immediately get off of Instagram.
Well, I mean, what's interesting too, and again, I'm trying not to give anything away, but like, why do you do it? For validation, for love, and maybe there's a chance to find like the real thing, and but you're so focused on the internet, and I thought it was just very relatable, and it's also interesting just how many times we did see social media as a theme in these shorts. Like, I think I wasn't expecting that, although I don't know why not, but
Well, it was at least those 2 times. The one with
yeah.
the kid trying to basically the reason that he got to where he was is he was somewhere he shouldn't have been because he was trying to do it for social media. Which again,
Hmm.
I know you said you haven't seen it, but the originals Into the Spider Verse, Miles gets into this situation because he wants to he wants to have this like secret like life where he's tagging and he's making these stickers and all these other things that he's trying to do, and he stumbles into the wrong place, and that's kind of what this kid did. Um,
Yeah.
so episode 10 was called Inkai,
Hmm.
and again, I feel like there were so many themes here that I don't really know what it was trying to tell me. But let's just
Yeah.
start with the animation because the animation was very cool. It was this sort of ethereal, like you can see your hand there, and like
Yeah.
that animation is moving the entire time within an animation that's moving. So it's almost like she's kind of made of stardust. Whereas like there was an episode called Stardust. I thought when I saw the imagery for this that this was Stardust, but this is Inkai, and it starts very sweetly with a mother and daughter,
Yes.
and you don't know what's happening. It's just a mother and
Right.
daughter hanging out, and then mom goes off to work and leaves the kid, and the kid wants to go outside. And when she does, that's where again it gets very political almost. Is like she
Yeah.
goes into the outside world where she's not protected anymore, and it's
Yeah.
horrible. And again,
Yeah.
that Ready Player One with the mobile homes, stopped on top of each other and dangerous, and the people are petty and all these other things. And
Yeah.
so, and she comes back in and set to be, I guess, to make a better world. And like, I love that, but it's a different kind of a message. It's like, let the other one burn. Honestly, I feel like it's where she's going with that.
Yeah, this one for me, I thought was really beautiful, but you're right. I mean, it felt just so deep. And, some of the things I wrote down, there's a sign in it because in this particular short, like there's a mountain that, they're kind of also trying to protect. And it says, stop mining our mountain. So to your point of like, it felt a little bit political. And we know that in many parts of Africa, there are, outside forces, outside countries, frankly, trying to, pillage off of land that is not theirs. And I don't feel like this is really giving anything away. But I thought the story was so beautiful. But at the end, when she says, only they can save themselves now as they kind of go off, I mean, that hit me really hard. And I was just like, wow. Because it felt like it could mean so many things.
Yeah, no, I agree. And so there were so many pieces of each of these that I feel like had a a message to them, like I said, and probably a lot of it I may have missed the message or read into the message incorrectly. I don't know, but there were a lot of them that had the message. And then at the very end, it's like, oh, okay, so now that I know the message, should I go back and watch it again? That's why I said I think you should go back and watch these, but watch them in by themselves. Like
I
don't
agree.
feel like you have to watch them all at once.
I
Um,
agree.
so here's a look, and this is the best screen that I can find of kind of all of them. The surf one up in the upper left, the herder boy in the center, and so on and so forth. What and this is all 10 of them, but the one at the very bottom is the one from the weird animation that we were freaked out by. Is there one in particular that you would say stands out for you as the best? I know you said a couple of them that you liked a
Mm.
little here and there. One that stands out as the best and one that stands out as the worst, because I have a worst, and I think I've already said it.
Um, I feel like the last one in Kai for me, and to me, it felt like the perfect way to end all of this. Like, not that
Yes.
it tied any of it up at all, because they all have very different themes, but there's something about they're in this horrible situation. They don't overcome it. I don't think that's really giving anything away. But they just kind of leave. And I don't know, like that just hit me in a way that felt so realistic. It's not the fairy tale ending. Everything is fine now, back to normal. And I think when we talk about like, are these a little bit dark? It's not, that, oh, things get wrapped up, someone comes in and saves the day necessarily with any of these. It's just kind of, it moves you along to the next
Yeah.
place that you're going to go to.
Yeah. No, I agree. So did you say the worst one? The one you think is the
Worst
worst?
one? Uh, I feel like I I feel like maybe I kind of want to say episode 4, the surf one.
Hmm.
But it feels weird to say that one because I almost feel like maybe that one I just didn't fully understand, or it's probably a good example of one that I definitely need to watch again. But it just felt like a lot was happening. Um, And so maybe that was, I mean, not that I didn't like it, but maybe that was my least favorite.
Yeah. Again, I think Stardust was my favorite just because it felt like you said it kind of was giving Star Wars, and I feel like
Yeah.
it was a neat twist, and I feel like some of it I saw coming, some of it I didn't, and that it felt like it could have been an adventure movie, the entire thing,
Hmm.
because of how it started and how it ended. And I thought you needed more than 12 minutes to tell this story, so that one was for me. I agree with you. I originally said the Spirit Racer, which was episode 2. I think it was probably Surf Signora, which I'm just like, like I didn't love the characters, any of them. They were all out to get the one guy, and it just, and then like the animation was dark, and again, it sort of gave that sort of uncanny valley, Polar Express kind of feel for the animation that I was just like, oh, are we done with this one already? Please,
Yeah.
can we move on? So, um, go ahead. What were you gonna say?
And well, I was gonna say, so there's kind of two thoughts I have about this. So I read that Kizazi Moto is Swahili for Generation Fire. And so I just thought that was interesting because in all of the protagonists, as they face their hurdles, they're doing so like they didn't back down. They kind of took on their challenges as you would expect a protagonist to do so. But the other question I had, and again, just thinking about when this was released, because Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, so many people were talking about that. It felt like a really refreshing, unique animation style. It felt like a new way to tell a story. And I almost felt like to some extent, that to me, Disney releasing these shorts, particularly when they did, felt like almost their answer to say, if we wanted to do a Black Panther version, we could. But it was also just interesting because I was like, I guess in my head, one of the things I thought about was like, can Disney pull, like, is Disney the right home for these shorts? Or, just feel like it should have been somewhere else? That was something that crossed my mind.
Interesting. Yeah, you know what? With the shorts in general, we had talked. Patrick and I talked about the new Disney like classics that were redone, and when we talked about those, it was like they've just redid these and put them in, and you don't really know unless you follow us or somebody else that this happened. It's like, where are you going to advertise that? Where are we going to find out about that? And there's a lot of stuff, especially with like something like this, it didn't have another world that it lived in before it lived on Disney Plus. Where are you going to hear about this kind of stuff if not from people like you and I talking about it? Because it's a deep cut. It will show up on the, on the this just added to Disney Plus, and it was added on July 5th. So if you go to the newly added bar and you scroll, 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 you can find it from July 5th still there. But it's how are people going to find this? Because it just feels like I think that it's really well done. People went to a lot of trouble to make 10 very different stories that they put all underneath this one umbrella uh, for the Generation Fire. And then, I hope people find it because, I mean, there is something unique and different here. But before we go and give final thoughts as to whether you would recommend this or not, I want to ask, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about? Are you ready for your wrap up?
Um, I think the only other thing that I feel like we kind of touched on lightly, but something that I thought was really well done through this, and something that I think we should continue to think about if you watch any of these shorts, is just the relationship between this idea of futurism and the land and creatures and nature. Because I felt like there was just something really interesting about the relationship between those. And it just kind of felt, to me, it felt uniquely African. Like in the West, when we tell stories, we're not thinking about the land or nature or creatures in the same way.
Ancestors as well. Where
Hmm.
you come from, the ancestors. Because again, I felt like that was touched on in a couple of ways. The one with the surf one
Hmm.
has that element of
Yeah.
connecting with your ancestor, a little Moana-ish, but it was still they still made that happen. Funny that I'm drawing parallels to all kinds of other things here, maybe, but
Hmm.
also maybe they're just universal themes. But the ancestors is the one that really kind of hit me over the head when it came to the totem one, which is something again
Yeah.
we've seen a little bit, but it was there was a lot of strong Strong feelings on that, and I get what you're saying. Is that like maybe we don't put as much substance into some of our entertainment as we probably should, and use it to, you know, infotain as Epcot was originally designed to do, right? So I want to thank everybody for watching. I know I saw a lot of Turdy, Fire Chief, Ronald. Um, I know Adam was with us a little bit earlier. Thank you guys for being with us in the chat. Thanks for being with us on Deep in the Plus, and of course, Kamila, thanks for finally agreeing to do a Deep in the Plus. And I think you picked a good one. This is something that we had to go deep to find, even though it's brand new. Even though it's brand new. So, and again, to our WIGS members, we love our WIGS, the WDWNT Interglobe Society. Find out more about how to join that family at patreon.com/WDWNT. Don't forget to join us on Park Center this coming Sunday night. We've got Piano Rob and a couple other great panelists coming on Sunday night. So please join us then. Kamila, I hope to see you again on Park Center very soon. But now, this is the big moment for you. This is the first time you've ever done this, because the people who are watching this want to know, and they need to know. Are you ready? Are you ready? Would you recommend these shorts?
I would, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the most common things I hear from people is I want Disney to do more animation, more original animation. I saw where just the other day in Epcot, people were saying, do you want more live action or do you want more animation? And people were saying by far they want more animation. So I think this is really unique storytelling. I don't think you're going to find this anywhere else. It'll be interesting to see what Disney does with this, but I feel like in an age where we're starting to see, like with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Spider-Man Spider-Verse, like these kind of unique animation styles really gain a lot of traction. It's kind of fun to see Disney have something that puts them in that conversation as well, and I think these are well done. They're interesting. So yeah, I would say absolutely give them a try, but like Rob said, maybe one at a time.
Yeah. I mean, definitely one at a time. That's my recommendation anyway, but I would recommend them too because it's some unique content. It's not necessarily stories that you've seen all over again, even though I've said and tried to draw some parallels. It was really more for our talk tonight between all of these, that they were very cool, different messages, 10 different stories. Some of them I feel like could have been full-length movies, and maybe they will. Pixar did that with Tin Toy, turning that into Toy Story. So maybe we see these made into a full-length movie at some place down the road. But I would recommend you watch them. But again, each short, don't let the word short fool you. Each short is about 12 minutes long. So make sure that you pace yourself. But definitely give them a try. Watch them. It should be fun. And thank you guys so much for watching. Kamila, thank you for being on. I
Thank
can't even
you.
tell you how much I appreciate you being on all the time, and for recommending this. And it was a lot of fun to do.
Bye, everyone. Have a great rest of your week.
Take care.